Hello one and all. Today I'm painting some absolute titans of the old world, the Cathayan Sentinel. These creations are born from the dragon's mastery of the elemental winds, fashioned in a form of a great warrior to protect Cathay from the forces of chaos at their doorstep. They are able to be made from pretty much any type of stone, which is pretty handy for Cathay, who bring forth multiple variants to choose from. Terracotta, jade, obsidian, granite, and even warpstone. Picking one can be difficult as all sound amazing projects to sink yourself into. I've decided, however, to paint up the terracotta variant as seen on the box art, along with a warpstone variant who has the ability to weaken their foes in close combat by just being there. Not so tough now then, hey? Rightio though, let's get painting. Here we have the list of all the paints we'll be using today to paint our two Cathayan Sentinels. These are just our recommendations for these schemes, so feel free to swap out any of these paints for ones that best suit you, along with the additional tools we've used today. If you're new to painting or want to know more about the paints and techniques used in this video, check out our Painting Essentials playlist on our YouTube channel. For our soon-to-be traditional terracotta coloured Sentinel, I've undercoated it with Zandri Dust to help start things off with a light brown tone, while our glowy Warpstone Sentinel variant has been undercoated in Chaos Black. For the Terracotta Sentinel, I'm starting with a large dry brush to paint this large model quickly, and Pallid Witch Flesh will be the perfect starter to pick out all the details. I'll take the excess off on a paper towel and begin applying this all over everything. With all its large and highly detailed armor panels, dry brushing this model is a dream. With a few passes to pick out the raised details, preps this miniature to add some depth with contrast and shade paints later. Before that begins though, I'll also add a couple of coats of Pallid Witch Flesh as a parchment colour for the fabric tassels around the legs, and picking out all the gemstones, finishing off this step nicely. Lovely stuff. To add the faint reddish hue terracotta is known for, I'm using Guilliman Flesh to start things off. To help control any dark spots that occasionally happens on larger flatter areas like the legs, I'm adding a drop of water to the paint on the palette, knocking back the intensity of the colour for a more even spread. When ready, start applying. I'm also painting this colour in sections, which allows me to soak up any pooling with a clean damp brush before it dries. I'll also be careful to avoid getting any of this paint onto the tassels and gemstones, but if a little does get onto those, I can tidy them back up with Pallid Witch Flesh. Even with these two steps so far, the Sentinel is basically ready for the tabletop. However, I'm going to push it a little further with some extra paints. Now let's add a little more red to the scheme with Berserker Bloodshade, painting this onto basically everything. It'll both help add some added tones to the armour, as well as shade the tassels and gemstones for later. This won't be the last time we'll be using this paint, but before we want to add another coat of the shade, I want to push the deepest recesses even further, so I'm thinning down 1 part Cygor Brown with 1 part Contrast Medium for a lighter colour that can be used to add a darker tint to the browns. I'll run the brush around the flatter areas, aiming the tip of the brush to be pushed into the recess line, all while using a spare clean damp brush to help feather out the paint before it dries. This will help blend this dark brown into the rest of the armour seamlessly, leaving more tonal variation in the armour. With the Cygor Brown completely dried, I can now go back in with Berserker Bloodshade once more to help intensify the red tones a little further, adding this into the pattern sections on the model, like those seen on the blade here, which finishes off this Mighty Warrior suit of terracotta armour. Now, let's truly wrap this model up by painting the gemstones. For this, I'm using Iyanden Yellow to help add a bright yellow colour to these details, all while adding a shaded tone of orange to show off the gemstones' refined beauty. 1 coat straight from the pot will do the trick, but you may find adding a drop of water to the mix can help control how much of that orangey tone will come through. To take things a step further, I'm adding a dry brush of Pallid Witch Flesh over the gems to define the edges and complete the look. While I'm at it, I'm also adding the littlest bit over some of the raised parts of the model, picking out some of the details after all that shading. And with the last highlight applied, this Mighty Warrior of Cathay is finished and set to stand tall on the battlefield, all while looking at its finest. With the Terracotta Sentinel ready, I'll move on to showing you my take on a Warpstone Sentinel. Right, time to get a little funky with the colours, specifically green. I'm starting this off by thinning down 1 part Caliban Green with 2 parts Lamia Medium to create a mix similar to a shade, but with more coloured pigment in it that will dry in the recesses. With this ready, I'll begin painting this across the textured armour of this warrior and any of the small rocky skin underneath to lay down a foundation for the brighter layer of paints to come. Adding a second or even third coat if needed will also help strengthen the colour. Don't worry if the paint does get on any other areas, as we'll be painting those areas later, which is handy as I'm going to push the brush in between the gaps in the armour that has these rocky bits of body underneath. We also have a fantastic video about painting warpstone on our channel for a deep dive into this unstable stone. I'll also want his great blades painted in this bright glowy tone, so I'm also adding a solid base coat of Caliban green to each blade before moving on to the next paint. I'll thin warpstone glow following the same steps as before, adding this into the same areas as well. As the paint is so fluid, I can easily dab a loaded brush onto the armour and the paint will naturally flow through the details, leaving the raised areas darker, letting the glowy core shine through. For the blades, I'm going to use one of my favourite painting tools, a sponge. With the same thinned paint mix, load it up and dab away, building up the colour gradually by allowing each layer to dry, then applying another. I'm building each layer of paint towards the tip and along the edges of the blades to lay down a glowing foundation, leaving a fully textured starter of this blade. To finish the green warpstone look is another thinned paint mix, this time with moot green. We don't need loads here to achieve the effect we want. I'm adding a few small dabs of paint into the textured armour, cleaning my brush, and with the damp bristles, I'll push the paint around evenly across the surface. After this first layer has dried, to add even more glow to the greens, I'll run some moot green around the edges of each armour panel, brightening them further for added oomph. While that dries, I'll bring forth the sponge once more for a single pass of moot green across the blades, brightening the area one warpstone step further. While the paint is still wet after applying, I'll switch to a clean side of the sponge and lightly dab back over to soften the sponge effect and create a smoother blend. Then, to refine the blade even further, I'll add an edge highlight to give the blades that extra sharp feel, defining these gigantic weapons. With a few well-placed dabs of paint, each getting brighter, has already started to show off this warrior's warpstone potential bursting from within. Now to build on that dark outer crust. Rightio, first step is to neaten up the armour after applying the green paint with Abaddon Black. For this, I'm using a medium dry brush to quickly add this colour back into the raised details across the armour. Doing this will also frame all those lovely greens, letting the colour irradiate next to the dark armour. With this first dry brush layer, I'm going to start lightening the dark armour with Corvus Black first, dry brushing this lightly over the whole model again. With that done, Skaven Blight Dinge is then applied, aiming for the most raised details. I find this warmer grey looks fantastic over rocky surfaces for a more natural look. However, if you want to switch this up, feel free to swap this out for another light grey. Lastly, as a little extra, Storm Vermin Fur wraps up the dry brushing as the lightest grey. This technique quickly picks out all the details on this towering, monstrous creature with ease, bringing with it a subtle range of tones across the dark armour that complement the bright green warpstone. The last thing to do is to finish off the gemstones. I'll paint each one with warpstone glow, adding a couple of extra coats to get a solid base colour on them. I've painted these last, rather than doing them with the other greens, as dry brushing the armour would run the risk of painting over these raised details. With the base coat layer complete, an edge highlight of moot green defines every stone with a crisp line, and just for fun, I'll go around each stone with an optional small dot highlight of pallid witch flesh in the corners, completing the look. With that, the Warpstone Sentinel is fully painted, glowing, with green crackling energies against the blackened armour. I've based these two with Stirland Mud, shading them with Berserker Bloodshade, and dry brushed with pallid witch flesh to pick out all the textured surface. And I can call these Cathanian Sentinels done, ready to protect the lands from the ever-encroaching forces of chaos in all their fully painted glory. I've had an absolute blast painting these, and though I like them both, the Warpstone Sentinel alternative just calls to me. Maybe it's the chaotic stone within, drawing me to it. For more painting videos though, head on over to our YouTube channel, or if you need more hands-on help, you can always pop to one of our Warhammer stores where our friendly staff will be more than happy to help. Thanks for watching, ciao for now, and I'll see you in the next one.